All right, excuse me. Trent Franks is ready. Sorry, Representative, but we had some trouble with your connection. It now appears to be fixed. We thank you for coming in. So just to highlight exactly how Phoenix is on the front lines of what's happening, I understand that it has become the kidnap capital of the United States, with one kidnapping a day at least, because a lot go unreported. Is that true?
Well, that's true. We have a 370-mile border here, and the illegal immigration has been a tremendous impact here, especially with the narco-terrorism and the criminal gangs, MS-13 gangs. And I have to say to you that about a little over half of all violent crimes in Maricopa County, which is our largest county, are committed by illegal immigrants. And to get some perspective on that, if you look nationally, about 25 people a day are either murdered or killed on the streets by drunk drivers that are illegal immigrants, and that means about 9,000 Americans die each year from illegal immigrants. And the tragedy there is that, you can just seem like that's just numbers in some ways, but the bottom line is that that's more people than have died in the time that we've been in the latest Iraqi and
all right,
Afghan
now,
war.
as bad as all that is, what I want to do, Congressman, is to focus on the drug violence, because what we're talking about is what is happening in Mexico, how that is spilling over, specifically related to drug violence. How much of all of what you were mentioning is specifically related to the drug cartels in Mexico?
Well, the drunk driving and things like that probably were not as intrinsically related, but there's no question that a lot of the murders and the kidnappings are directly related to narco-terrorism and drug trafficking. It's the overwhelming genesis of all of it.
And I understand that home invasions are up. There was one case of a home invasion in Phoenix, in your county, Maricopa County, last year. It was carried out by attackers who had military-style rifles, and they were dressed in uniforms similar to a Phoenix police tactical unit. That's pretty scary stuff.
That's pretty frightening. I think that it's pretty telling that there are now some known connections between MS-13 and even Al-Qaeda members. And this is something
remind
that
our viewers what MS-13 is, Congressman.
They're a criminal drug gang that is from Mexico primarily, and they are a lot of the main force of criminal drug activity that comes over the border. And if they get connected too much to Al-Qaeda, and say an Iran or someone like that passes on nuclear technology at some point, this could take on an entirly different perspective.
Well, you don't have any evidence that might have happened already, do you?
As far as any nuclear technology,
any kind of relationship between the drug gangs and international terrorists?
There are known connections between Al-Qaeda and MS-13. That's correct.
How do they use one another?
Well, I think right now they're just in the hand-holding stage, and they probably are just trying to cooperate in ways that they feel like satisfies both interests on their part. But just the fact that they're even communicating with each other is something that gives me great pause, because these are both the groups that have no respect for innocent human life, and both groups can use each other in ways that I think are very frightening to our national security.
And
first and foremost,
I just want to be clear about this. You have been briefed on this by federal officials.
Yeah, I want to be careful how I say that. I never say anything of a classified nature, but just to repeat myself, there are known connections between MS-13 and Al-Qaeda in parts of the world that I feel like could have implications for the future.
All right. Now, just to lest people think this is just something on the border, there was a federal report issued in December that shows that Mexican cartels, and I'm quoting from the report, they maintain drug distribution networks or supply drugs to distributors in at least 230 United States cities. So this is all over the country.
Yeah. No, it's a big situation, and President Calderon in Mexico, to his credit, is doing a great deal of work to try to curtail these gangs, and he's absolutely turned the military loose and is doing everything he can. And part of the violence you're seeing today is a little bit of an offshoot of that. But the reality is, if we let these gangs go forward, if we show them that we don't intend to deal with strength, that I'm convinced that they will push us as far as we will let them, and that it has, again, profound implications. I got two new little babies, And I consider these things in a different way than I used to. But the reality is, that my first purpose as a member of Congress is to make sure that we protect our citizens and their constitutional rights. And if we fail that, nothing else we do has any real consequence.
Congressman, stay with us if you can. Want to bring in a couple of other guests. Texas, of course, has the longest border with Mexico, and just a few miles from El Paso, Texas, is Ciudad Juarez in Mexico. Juarez is the epicenter of the Mexican drug war, with over 1,600 drug-related killings last year. It is the murder capital of Mexico. When the Mexican government sent 5,000 troops to stop the violence, the drug cartels demanded that the police chief step down and resign immediately. Now, if he doesn't, they warned, we will murder one of your men every 48 hours until he does. They first killed the guy's deputy plus 3 of his men, then an officer, then a prison guard. Bodies began to pile up until the drug lords got their way and the police chief resigned. Now, that's what the Mexicans are fighting, and like it or not, America is in it with them. Joining us now, Terrence Papa. He is the author of Drug Lord, The Life and Death of a Mexican Kingpin. He is an expert on the war on drugs. And James Carafano, an expert on Homeland Security at the Heritage Foundation. Now, Terry Papa, I've known you for quite a while, about 19 years. I know, the drug mafia essentially put a bullseye on you, and actually you've moved out of the region that caused you a problem. But at that time, Pablo Acosta, a drug lord that you focused on in your book, who was killed, by the way, was almost seems like kindergarten compared to these guys, doesn't he?
Well, he set the tone, basically. He had a good murder record himself, but he was like the granddaddy of the Juarez drug cartel.
But just to give folks an idea of what I'm talking about, he bitterly chastised any of his lieutenants working under him who went after the family members, right? At least in the beginning of his drug cartel, correct?
Right. I would say he was the old Godfather type of a crime figure. He had a certain code of honor that doesn't seem to prevail any longer. Today, the traffickers seem to be ready to kill anybody. Children, family, whoever gets in their way.
And James Carafano,
that wasn't the case 20 years ago.
With this kind of an attitude on the part of these drug dealers today, how soon before they defy U.S. law and begin acting here the way they act back home?
Well, it's already beginning to happen. After the police chief resigned in the city, they threatened to behead the mayor, and they also hung up banners in the city saying they were going to behead his family members, including family members that lived across the border in the United States. So it's already happening.
Terry, are you surprised that it hasn't happened more in border towns with Arizona and Texas?
Well, actually, just wait. The worst is coming. It's escalating. I don't see any possibility of this going away anytime soon. Any area that isn't affected by this is going to be pretty soon. It's a problem which we are feeding by buying drugs. We send $15 to $30 billion a year into Mexico, and this is the consequence of it. I don't see any solution to it. We're going to be spending God knows how much money supporting the Mexican government, the Mexican army, to go after these people. But at the same time, we're sending $15 to $30 billion a year in drug money into Mexico.
Right.
What other consequences can you expect?
Well,
this is what's going to happen.
Money laundering is one thing that used to be I remember one prosecutor telling me it was the Achilles heel of drug dealers was money laundering. That's where they usually got caught. But I'm wondering, banks right now, we began this show by talking about the trouble that banks are in. Could it be that banks are so desperate right now that they might kind of loosen their standards a little bit and maybe operate as they should against drug money?
Most bank owners would take a tremendous financial hit to try to protect the country. So I don't think the bank owners are our challenge, but there's no question that money laundering is a huge issue. You know, it's interesting that we have James Carafano on the program here with Heritage, and the work that they do there is so important, but I consider his voice one of the most clarion and important in America on this subject, because he understands that there is an intrinsic connection between border security and national security, especially as it relates to the coincidence between jihadist terrorism and nuclear proliferation. And those are things that we hope are a few years away, but it's very important now that we deal with the narco-terrorism now, so that we're not dealing with nuclear terrorism later.
Well, Jim, let me ask you first, though, about the money laundering situation. Is there any way to use money laundering to get inside of the cartel and maybe bust it up, or is that just a hopeless situation?
Well, it's really kind of a four-part harmony. I mean, people talk about drug trafficking, but there's really four kinds of trade going on here. There's drugs and people being smuggling north, and these guys really don't care which, as long as they, turn a good profit. And the money that they make is being laundered and pushed south, along with a lot of weapons from the United States going into Mexico. And these trades are feeding on each other. And so what you really have to do is go after this whole conspiracy network. I hear the argument about, it's all about drug use. If we just didn't take drugs, this wouldn't happen. Well, what happened is when drug use in the United States actually went down, the drug trade didn't stop. What happened is drug use in Mexico skyrocketed. And then they went and found new markets in Europe. So this notion that just let's legalize drugs and all go away, it's simply not true.
Well, I don't think Terry would go that far. Terry, you do think that legalization would at least stem the problem, but you don't think it would solve it, do you?
Well, it's not going to solve the problem of addiction, but it will solve the problem of these tremendous amounts of money going to organized crime in Mexico. It is a terrible problem in that it has a corrosive effect on government there. Mexico has an authentic government at this time. The old regime collapsed in the year 2000. Prior to that, it was a true narco-type government, a narco regime. But before long, though, I think the big danger of all this money is that Mexico is going to revert to what it was before, being a narco state in which the people in power promote and profit from the activity. And the only way to ever counter that is to take the profits out of drugs. And it's a bitter pill to have to swallow, but the consequences of Mexico destabilizing and becoming chaotic, which is a potential for the future, are very unnerving. We would have to defend a 2,000-mile border. Do we want that? And why should we? If the only thing that is fueling this is money, take the money out of it.
Terry,
that doesn't really happen.
Quickly, Congressman, you have 10 seconds. Go ahead.
Yeah, it doesn't happen that way. Usually all you do when you legalize hard drugs is to make them ubiquitous everywhere and complicate the situation even further. If we think that legalizing drugs is going to be the answer to this, we're out of our minds.
All right, that's got to be the last word, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Coming up on deck, when a rough patch of weather